Welcome, data enthusiasts. I'm Joseph from Zuma, and this is Data for Good. Our podcast is brought to you by Zuma. We're a dedicated recruitment company for senior data, insights, and analytics professionals, connecting you with Berlin's most influential and innovative companies. But today, we're joined by Serena Li. Serena is Director of Consumer Insights with Strava over in San Fran. Strava, of course, I won't introduce too much. Most people will know the multi-sport tracking platform that I also use. But we were first introduced during your days at Babel in Berlin. That's right, isn't it, Serena?
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, Joseph. It's really great to be here. I was in Berlin when you reached out. I lived in Berlin for 7 years. So Berlin is like my second home. I recently moved to California, so really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Awesome. Yeah. Connecting you with your roots to some extent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, let's get into it, Serena. How's my audio, by the way?
Pretty good.
Okay, cool. I think there might be a tiny little lag, so I'll consider that in our conversation.
Okay.
Great. Today, I understand that you'd like to talk about the state of data insights, or at least a particular area of data insights. And we will definitely get into that. It sounds pretty exciting, whatever direction you take it in. But let's wind back a minute. We like to start the pod by asking our guests a little bit about how they first discovered data analytics and how they first got into data.
I think a lot of data and insights professionals are driven by curiosity. We like to get to the bottom of things. We like to ask why. We like challenges. And I'm not different. So when I went to college, I actually wanted to study theoretical physics. I thought that was the way to understand the world. And then my mom said that would be your path to unemployment. So I decided
unemployment,
to go for.
Did you say? Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. She's like, it would be very difficult for you to find a job if you don't want to stay in academia. I think it's just right, and to some extent. So I decided to go for mathematics, and I really loved it. So as a math major, it was a natural progression to go into the data world after graduation. And I always found studying human behaviors fascinating. So I took an opportunity that allowed me to analyze people. And I enjoyed problem solving, and then I realized I could solve much bigger problems with a team. So I got into people management positions, and then one thing led to another. I ended up where I am now.
Wow, fantastic. You know, your mum might have been right, not for me to say. However, we do see in the candidates that we meet daily or weekly, we do see a lot of physics graduates and physics masters graduates as well. It lends itself very, very well to the data analytics world. Yeah. So, yeah, maybe your mum was right. Maybe there was some middle ground there.
Yes.
And also, great that you've made that connection, or you've shown us that there is a very clear connection between human behavior and analytics. They are completely integrated, intertwined with one another. We need one to get the other, and vice versa. And that brings us to, I assume, your position as Director of Consumer Insights with Strava.
Yep.
So you've been there a few months, I guess,
Yeah.
learning the lay of the land.
Yeah.
Us way back in Europe, we're constantly making comparisons with the US. We understand that the US is highly advanced in its use of data, for better or worse. That's not the topic of today. But since you've been there in the short time, what have you gleaned? What have you learned? Have you noticed any differences between how Europe and how the US does data?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I'm privileged to have had the opportunity to work in Europe and now in the US. So it's super interesting to see the data and insights world from two perspectives. I think there are a lot the US can learn from Europe and vice versa. And we all know that Europe is way ahead of the rest of the world in terms of protecting private data, right? Arguably, it's the most significant difference between the US and Europe in terms of data insights.
It's topical right now, in fact. It's very topical.
Yeah.
It's been in the news with the Biden administration and how they're responding to EU data laws and how, yeah, that's another topic.
Yeah. Yeah. The US is definitely catching up. California is, I guess, ahead of the rest of the country. But Europe is still, ahead. I think the leader in this space. Well, I'm personally an advocate for GDPR. I think the data and insights professionals in Europe tend to have relatively less access to some consumer data than their peers in the US. So you wouldn't
That
have the
would make
chance to,
sense, right?
yeah, yeah. They just don't have access to certain types of data or the volume data that their American peers have. So you don't have the chance to work on, for example, high dimensional data reduction problems if you didn't have high dimensional data at the first place, right? So the same goes for data infrastructure and data storage. If you are collecting much more data, then you got to figure out where you are going to put that data, right? Um, um, and actually, a very good example of US companies being innovative using consumer data would be a data product that Strava created called
Nice
Strava
plug.
Metro.
Nice plug.
Yeah.
Talk us through it.
Time for me to, yes, time for me to advertise Strava product. No,
I'm
but
a big
seriously,
fan, by the way. I'm a huge fan.
yeah. Yeah, I think this is probably my favorite part about Strava. Um, Strava built a tool using aggregated consumer writing and running data to help urban planners to design pedestrian-friendly and bikeable cities because we were able to collect all those movement activity data, right? Yeah, so to the audience, if you want more bike lanes in your neighborhood, upload your biking to Strava and promote Strava Metro to your city council.
Interesting.
No, seriously.
It's interesting because,
yeah, go ahead.
and I do apologize, I think there's a little bit of a lag, so I'm trying not to interrupt, but so much of it is interesting. So it was first a platform targeted at urban planning rather than right now, at least the product I see is about multi-sports and tracking and socializing your data from sports activity. Okay. Wow, interesting evolution.
Correct. Yes. Yeah, when we have all those data from our users, their biking, their running data, we were thinking, how can we, use those data to make the world a better place? And we were like, okay, maybe we can, aggregate those data, provide it to, city designers so they can, look at where people are biking, where should we put those bike lanes? How can we make the city more pedestrian friendly? That's how the product started. This product is actually free for city urban planners to use. So if you're listening to this and you're interested in using the aggregated data, then just go to Strava Metro and submit your application.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. Strava Natural, is that?
Metro, yes.
Metro, my apologies. Strava Metro.
Metro.
Yeah. I have several colleagues across the industry that would find that very interesting. Urban planners, but also potentially data stakeholders from the mobility industry, both commercial and public. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's some strong background from Strava there, and although it's a really short time, and I don't want to set such high expectations, but could you tell us a little bit about what your team's working on, or how it's done differently in consumer insights since you've been there?
Yeah. So what I'm working mostly is understand consumers on a human level, going deeper into the psychological drivers and look into what is the emotional need that drives their surface behavior, right? I guess I can give you an example of what I used to work on at Bubble, right? We all know that people learn languages, and you want to know why people learn languages, right? And on the surface, people will tell you, I learn languages because I'm going on a trip to Paris with my family. So on the surface, the reason is travel. But if you look deeper into it, there is a fundamental human truth that drives this reason that they learn for travel. It could be that they are going to Paris with their family, and this person is maybe, let's say, the father of the family, and he wants to order food for his kids. He wants to make sure that the family feels safe. So it is this, I want to provide for my family. I want to protect my family. I want my family to have better experience. Hence, I'm learning. So that is the fundamental human driver. And my job is to help the organization to understand one level deeper than what we normally observe.
I see. So one level deeper than what you've just described, or exactly that?
Yeah. Yes.
Interesting. So the human need, the utility behind the product's use. Very interesting. Could you relate that to Strava then? Babel is very interesting, and as are language platforms, and particularly the machine learning that goes into creating these platforms. I'm really interested in Strava, but also from a personal perspective, being a user. And I'm not just trying to be a fanboy, but I find it fascinating how it's able to track my movements, track the movements of people around me, how it's able to make recommendations, record lots of different things that are going on anytime I take a run or a cycle somewhere. So could you relate that to Strava?
Yeah, definitely. I think tracking is not different from, language learning. We know that people want to track, but we want to know why people want to track, right? And one reason is we all want to be better. We all have the desire for self-improvement, right? But self-changing is hard. And we need something that, either gives us positive feedback so that we keep motivated and inspired to keep going. And tracking is a way for us to see our own progress and improvement. And that just has so many implications on our product side, right? How do you make this progress visible to users? How can you help them to celebrate every little step of success, right? So that deeper understanding enable us to create product that actually addresses your deeper needs.
There's a little bit of the, I have to admit now, although I'm not a user of Instagram, a little bit of the same thinking perhaps behind social validation and social connection. I think I use Strava for team events, and sometimes I use it when I'm running with a friend. So you're able to compare those results and compare routes and such. So yeah, there's definitely that that social validation need that goes into it as well. Interesting, really interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so consumer insights. I'm curious. A lot of the conversations that we have around Berlin are at the moment about data mesh and how we integrate data into the business side of an organization, and the professionals and the resources and the tooling and the strategies that go along with that. What are your thoughts on that, and what's going on from what you can see in the US?
Do you mean there is, what do you mean it's happening in Berlin?
Sorry. So we have a lot of conversations like this and slightly different with senior data leadership professionals in Berlin. And a lot of the conversations that we have are around how the data side of an organization is fit into the business side of an organization. And what goes along with that is the philosophy or the concept of data mesh, whether that relates to your work or not. But I'm curious to know, now that you're at director level, how should data professionals fit into an organization? How do you see it working now?
Yeah, that's an excellent question and probably $1 million question. Yeah, I think data org structure design is super fascinating, and there are a couple of important questions to address. And I think probably the most debated one is how centralized or decentralized and data org should be. Today, most data org tend to be on the decentralized side of the spectrum, meaning you assign one or more data analysts, data scientists, or analytics engineer to each product vertical. In a decentralized world, analysts can go deep into the given function. When there is a request, the stakeholders will spend less time on explaining the context. But
so just to give an overview, that product team would have a software engineer, a data scientist or
scientist,
and then essentially DevOps, product manager, UX, UI. Okay, sorry.
Exactly. So, that's how, most data product org is set up. But in this embedded model, you often see silos. There tends to be less exchanges between analysts. You might have a weekly team meeting, I think, which is most of the data teams have nowadays. The analysts will share the project that they are working on, but it is more difficult for the data team to identify common themes and patterns across functions. And it is more difficult for the data org leader to influence higher level strategic decisions. So I would challenge the data and insights professional to revisit the embedded model. I don't think there is a perfect model. You have to find a best based on your industry and your growth stage. But I would challenge us to think, would a more centralized structure enable you to have higher impact across the board? What role do you want data to play in your organization? Do you want it to passively responding to tickets, or do you want to be in the driver's seat and actually have a say where the company goes?
As a data professional?
Yeah,
okay. So there's a couple of things to unpack there. The first, or the top one, was about how the data leaders are unable to, or are less able to, influence decisions with the decentralized model. Could you explain that a bit further for me? Why is that?
Yeah. So I guess one of the reason, and I think most important reason, is when you have a decentralized structures, you have your team deep in each of the product verticals, meaning they have this exchange across the board. So they are very deep. They are not having this 10,000 feet view on what's going on. There is a less sharing and exchanges on what's happening at different places in a company. So it's more difficult to identify the common themes. That means it's more difficult for the leader of the data org to have a say in the business decisions.
And also, I think, if I'm understanding correctly, each of those data professionals that is deep into their product vertical and not able to see high level, they're not able to think about the business goal. It's really only their one product focus, and therein they can't help the senior data leaders do their strategizing. Very interesting.
100%.
May I ask, how do Strava set up their data teams? Is it centralized or decentralized?
It's decentralized.
Okay, just curious.
Yeah,
okay.
It is.
And as you said, there's not a right or wrong, but there's you believe there's ways that could be improved. So talk us through the more centralized model. What would that look like?
Yeah, I think in a more centralized structure, your data org would be a standalone team, meaning you don't have one data analyst or one data scientist assigned or embedded in the product vertical.
Mm-hmm.
You obviously you are still going to have data requests, and you would still have reporting tasks to work on, but the team would work on these things actually as a team. So the team would have a chance to work on, for example, different parts of the organization, work on different product requests. Some will work on acquisition, some will work on retention, and that would enable more exchanges and also give them a better view on what's actually going on in the company. And that also give the leader of the data org an opportunity to know what's actually happening to the business, to the company on the high level, and how can they make recommendations to influence the business decisions.
Fantastic. So yeah, they get to share information, share different perspectives from teams that they've worked with or products that they've worked with on prior projects, and also maybe that they can unify the ways of working, so we all produce and we all deliver projects in a similar fashion. I like it. Do you know of any businesses that are taking this approach?
I do actually. Actually, Bubble has a more centralized model, which I think it
Right.
work really well. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, we have spoken to a senior data leader from Babel, but yeah, maybe that's a topic that we can revisit. Yeah, sounds very interesting. And it also, I think, from a career perspective of a data professional, it would be encouraging them to think more like a business strategy professional as well as just a data professional. Interesting, which also gives them skills that will be used as they move up the chain to lead or tech lead or people lead. Oh, very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think that's something that we should start to socialize, that question more and more.
Yeah.
Looking at
100%. Yeah.
We've talked generally about data professionals in the industry. Can I focus on your specific area, consumer insights? Where are we at? Where are we at now with our understanding and operational activities, and where can we be, or where will we be?
Super interesting question. I think I think consumer insights is more mature in some industry than others. And I think tech is one industry where you don't see a lot of consumer insights, or where like consumer insights has a lot of opportunities to grow. We have a huge volume of online behavior data that gives us a superficial understanding of people. But two women at the same age living in the same zip code might even be next door, can have completely different needs and preferences and political orientations. A lot of online businesses or tech companies would treat them the same because their dry data or observed data or currently observed data are the same. So there is a lack of deep insights about people. We currently don't understand people or user, on the other side of digital world as humans. I can give you this example. I think one of the reason that people hate ads is they actually don't need the product or the services that was advertised to them. The ads were irrelevant and it was a waste of consumers' time. But advertising is actually a service, and we are not serving consumers well. In a perfect world, a product or a service is advertised to a consumer at the exact moment they need it. And the product or the service is exactly what consumer needs. So consumers don't have to go through this exhausting process of searching, right? But
or being targeted
yeah,
with something that's irrelevant to them.
Exactly, yeah. But in a perfect world, you would see the product or the services advertised to you at the moment that you need it. So once you need something, you don't have to, go through this lengthy search process to look for the thing you need. It will be advertised to you. So advertising is a service, but we're not doing this service well. But the data and analytical capabilities we have today just doesn't allow that level of understanding. So I'm sorry to say that consumers will have to keep being bombarded with irrelevant ads.
Or in my case, relevant ads because companies have data on what I've been looking at and what I might be interested in, but not targeted to me at the right time.
Yeah,
for example,
could be.
Yeah. I don't need to be looking at sports apparel products at 9 a.m. on a Monday morning when I should be looking at strictly work-based products, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so is this something that you think can be addressed in the short term?
I don't think we can address this in the short term. This requires the whole industry to discuss and figure out answers to a lot of questions, from what kind of data we can collect to what analytical capabilities we should have. How can we connect what we observe to the deeper psychological human truth? And I think it goes back to the first point we talked about. Under the current privacy laws, regulations, what actually, we can, we as companies can collect, and how can we connect those, collectible data to further understand people as people.
It's a difficult situation, isn't it? In terms of the proliferation of privacy rights or individuals' rights to privacy, and progress in terms of analytics capability and insights capability.
Yeah.
But one thing that's true is product innovation is often born out of identifying a real customer need, and you as the potential creator are identifying that need.
Yeah.
So perhaps you could be the outlier that changes things. Do you see any? Perhaps you could be the outlier that changes things in that regard.
Yeah.
In either with Strava or with similar mobility or tracking apps, where do you see the future of consumer insights specific to those areas? Sorry, where do you see the advances in consumer insights?
Yeah, I think, just to be completely transparent with you, I think consumer insights is still taking baby steps in tech companies. We see users as numbers, and we don't see them as humans. So when we see, for example, their tracking data, we see that, oh, they like tracking, so let's encourage them to track more. But we don't understand why they want to track, right? Like I said, there's a need for social recognition that's actually driving their tracking behavior. There is a need for self-recognition. I want to see myself progressing, right? That's driving this tracking. So what you need to address is not a need for tracking, but the need for self-recognition or need for social recognition. And where insights has a role to play is really help your data team or help the business to understand what is the deeper human truth that's, driving what your data team is seeing.
What is the deeper human truth that's driving what your data team is seeing? Interesting.
That's right.
The social, and self-recognition, I'd like to see that come to some fruition, particularly with Strava. So I will look out for that. I'm conscious of time, and it has been, a really great conversation, really insightful and thought-provoking in terms of the human psychology behind it. What I'd like to do before we wrap it up, given your status, given your years of experience and clearly your wisdom, could you provide us with, or should I say, what single piece of advice could you provide the data community with today?
Oh, that's a hard question. I guess my advice would be double down on your storytelling skills. Keep in mind that your job is not delivering a data analysis, but influencing business decisions. You succeed when your work makes a business impact.
Okay, double down on your storytelling skills. So thinking about how your work in data analytics can have an influence on the business.
Yeah.
Storytelling skills. Tell us a bit more about that. What areas should they be doubling down on, and why?
Yeah. So a lot of the time when data analysts got excited presenting the fancy analysis or the statistics model to the stakeholders, if you look at the audience, you would know you have lost them. The US comedian Alan Alda wrote an interesting book about communication. He wrote this book to scientists, but I would recommend every data analyst or anyone in a technical position to read. So the book is, if I understood you, would I have this look on my face? So knowing how to tell a good story using your audience's language is an essential skill for all the data professionals. If your internal stakeholders doesn't understand what you are telling them, then all the sweat and blood you put into the hard work is wasted. If you are talking to someone in marketing, then speak a language that marketers understand. If you're talking to someone to finance, speak their language. Data only creates value when they result in changing of business decisions.
Mm-hmm. That's fascinating. We often talk about social skills on the podcast and how data professionals need to think more socially to understand their audience, but this really takes it to another level. Thanks very much for that, Serena.
Yeah.
And I've taken note of the book, and I'll post a link to it. If I understood you, would I have this look on my face?
That face? Yeah.
Brilliant. It sounds like a funny one as well. So I'll check it out.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for everything today, Serena. Really interesting conversation and a journey you've taken us on. So thanks very much for that. I'd also like to say, for anyone else who has any questions or feedback for us at Zuma about the podcasts, or indeed for Serena about consumer insights, drop them in the comments section. We'd be really, really pleased to hear from you. And of course, don't forget to like and share so that we can spread this to as many people as possible. And Serena, until next time.
Thank you so much. It's
See you
great
too.
to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you too. All right. Take care now.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.